And when investigators look at the remaining 6 capsules in that blister pack, every single one of them contained cyanide.
Well, this just makes it feel like it must be someone on the inside, right, to be able
Got
to do
to
that.
be. And this is one of the most perplexing aspects of this entire investigation. Because remember, Johnson & Johnson confirmed that contamination must have been carried out by someone outside of the factory. But this was now a contaminated blister pack. Any tampering would have been obvious, but there's just no signs. And this means it must have left the factory with the cyanide in it. And so now suspicion was firmly back on Johnson & Johnson and their manufacturing process.
Did they do a cover-up, or did they not investigate it properly?
Feels like it, doesn't it? Welcome to the Compendium, an assembly of fascinating things, a weekly variety podcast that gives you just enough information to stand your ground at any social gathering.
We explore stories from the darker corners of true crime, the hidden gems of history, and the jaw-dropping deeds of extraordinary people.
I'm Kyle Risi, your ringmaster for this week's episode.
And I'm Adam Cox, the audience heckler for this week.
Nice. What are some of your jibs that you're going to be throwing out?
Well, just take note that if I don't like today's story, I'm going to start booing.
What? You do not want to do that in this episode, I promise you.
Okay. Hey,
your
I can
story
still
sucks!
Someone died.
It's pretty horrific, Adam.
Oh, okay, fine. I will just leave a really bad review afterwards.
God, please don't do that. You'll create some kind of pack mentality and all of our listeners will start leaving negative reviews. Leave more positive reviews.
Yeah, good point.
Before we dive in, a quick heads up for all of our lovely freaks out there. Remember that signing up to our Patreon as a free member will get you early access to next week's episode an entire 7 days before anyone else. And as we say every week, it's completely free of charge.
And if you want even more, consider becoming a certified freak for a small monthly subscription. It will unlock all of our unreleased episodes up to 6 weeks earlier, plus brand new, never heard before, and straight off the press.
We're also expanding our Patreon benefits even further because now you can access all of our vintage Compendium episodes from season 1. These are all the episodes from back in the day when we were first starting out, the ones that really made you guys fall in love with the show. So we've packaged them all up and now are all available for our Patreon members.
Yes, there's just so much content for you to get stuck into, and we'll be adding even more exclusive episodes for Patreon members as the weeks go on. So signing up for as little as $3 is literally the best way to support the show.
And depending on your tier that you choose, we've got some exclusive merch to send your way, absolutely free. We have recently built these beautifully machine-lathed exclusive Compendium keychains, so we can be with you wherever you may go.
Always near your crotch.
Always near your crotch. We want to be comfortably near your crotch. This is a brand new benefit for all of our certified freaks, and it's just a special thank you, basically, for supporting us over all these months. If you're an existing member, you just need to send us a DM with your address and we'll ship one out to you no matter where you are in the world. Now, with all the tariffs that have been going on, we have had a couple members that have written in saying that they've been charged a tariff in order to receive the keychain. If that is you and you can provide evidence of that, we will refund you the tariff amount.
Yeah, we're sorry. We didn't know what Donald was going to do.
We had no idea. Surprisingly, though, all of our American listeners that have received their keychains, they've not had any issues. We had a listener in Spain.
Oh, maybe that's a Europe thing then.
Do you think?
Sorry, Donald, not you. Also, don't forget to follow us on your favorite podcast app and leave us a review. Your support really helps us reach even more people who, like you, love a good tale of the unexpected.
All right, freaks. Enough of the housekeeping, because Adam, today on the Compendium, we are diving into an assembly of mystery, medicine, and mayhem.
Okay, so obviously something went wrong, I'm guessing.
Today's story is probably one of the most defining moments in modern American history. I want you to picture this. You've got a headache. It's nothing serious, just one of those everyday aches that kind of buzz behind your eyes, right? So you decide to pop to the local supermarket to grab some Tylenol, which in the USA is just a standard over-the-counter painkiller. In the UK, it's kind of like the equivalent of like a pack of paracetamol.
Okay.
So this is probably something that you've done like dozens of times without even thinking. But this time, that seemingly simple trip results in your horrifically violent and sudden death.
Just over some paracetamol?
Mm-hmm. Pretty scary stuff, huh?
What was wrong with it?
That's exactly what happened in Chicago in 1982 when 7 perfectly healthy people died suddenly and violently. They were all different ages, different backgrounds. The only thing linking them was that they'd each taken 2 capsules of this Tylenol.
And is that a standard dose then, 2 capsules?
Yeah, it's like 1,000 milligrams.
So they haven't like overdosed or anything like that, and it's just a regular over-the-counter drug which you can get anywhere.
Exactly, no overdose. But because these 7 deaths all happened within days of each other, in some cases hours, the news caused mass panic across the United States, sparking one of the longest criminal investigations in US history, pulling one of America's biggest companies into chaos, ultimately changing how we actually package medicine, cosmetics, and even your favorite fromage frais yogurt forever.
Fromage frais?
So that little foil seal,
Uh-huh.
that is designed to kind of showcase whether or not someone's tampered with the product.
I just thought it was to keep it fresh.
Possibly, but it's also tamper-proof, right? Because once you lift that lid, you know that someone's opened that, right?
Yeah, fair point.
What is nuts is that even today, Adam, we still do not know who was responsible because this case is still completely unsolved. I am, of course, talking about the infamous 1982 Tylenol murders that drove widespread panic across the USA. Do you know anything about the story?
No, so my first thoughts was, did they have an allergic reaction to something within the drug? But the fact that you're saying that this is a murder case,
Yeah,
someone intended or tampered with the product, is that what we're saying?
pretty much. It was one of the biggest product tampering cases in modern American history.
Did not know about this.
And it's a pretty horrific story, purely from the fact that these ordinary people were killed by an ordinary household pain remedy that millions of people across the United States trusted and had in the medicine cabinet.
That's so weird because even the other day, you were like, oh, I've got a headache. Do we have any paracetamol?
And we didn't,
Yeah, we didn't. But that's so normal for someone to go and take that, right?
without even flinching, right? It's just like autopilot.
Yeah, you'd never think it would be dangerous in kind of the recommended dosage at all, would you?
So, Adam, today's episode is a bit of an epic. I did try to cut this out into 2 episodes, but I just didn't want to leave anything out, and I didn't want this to be another double biller. But in today's episode of the Compendium, I'm going to tell you about this incredible moment in American history, the 1982 Chicago Tylenol murders, how the story ended up terrifying a nation, and ultimately led to us reshaping how we package products around the world.
Okay, I'm settled in. I've got my coffee and my pastry. I'm ready for this.
I hope you're not going to be eating that pastry while we're recording.
Just
Adam, what are your thoughts?
I'll get back to you.
So, Adam, our story starts on Wednesday, September the 29th, 1982, in Arlington Heights in Illinois. 27-year-old Adam Janus, a US postal worker, wakes up feeling pretty rough. He's got kind of like flu-like symptoms settling in, and he decides that he's going to take the day off work. But you know how it is, like he's still a dad, he still has responsibilities. So Adam decides to push through. He gets up, he gets dressed, he goes about his morning as best he can. Eventually, he reaches the final chore of the day, picking up his daughter Cassia from nursery. On the way home, he stops at a local Jewel supermarket to run a quick errand. He picks up a couple steaks for dinner, some flowers for his wife Teresa, and a bottle of extra strength Tylenol. Basically, just to help ease whatever kind of bug that he is suffering with. When Adam gets home, he helps his daughter get fed. He turns to his wife Teresa and says he's going to take a couple of Tylenol and lie down for a bit. A while later, Teresa sees Adam coming out of the bathroom. He is clutching at his chest. His face is contorted with pain. So Teresa helps him to the bed, and that's when she notices that his breathing is starting to become really shallow and his pupils are starting to dilate. In that moment, she looks out the window and she sees 2 of her neighbors chatting outside, and she knows that one of them is a nurse. So she runs outside to grab some help. By the time they get to Adam, he is full on convulsing. He is foaming at the mouth and his eyes are rolling into the back of his head.
Shit.
The nurse tries to desperately resuscitate Adam, yelling at Teresa to call for an ambulance. When the paramedics get there, Adam is completely unresponsive. They rush him to the Chicago Northwest Community Hospital, and just a couple hours later at 3:15 p.m., Adam Janus is pronounced dead.
Bloody hell. So that is a really quick turn of events. And to be convulsing and foaming at the mouth, my first thoughts with that is like poisoning, right? Not something of any regular sickness that I'm aware of where, if you've got a bit of a cold, that doesn't happen.
So the doctor overseeing Adam is a doctor called Thomas Kim. Now, he gathers the family into the waiting room to break the news that, of course, Adam has sadly died. In the waiting room are Adam's wife, his mother, his brothers, Joseph and Stanley, and Stanley's new wife, also named Teresa. Dr. Kim tells them that Adam has suffered a massive heart attack. And despite, obviously, their best efforts, he just didn't survive. Now, naturally, the family is devastated. They're desperately trying to understand how a young, fit man could just collapse and die out of nowhere. So Dr. Kim explains to them at this point that there's no clear explanation what caused the heart attack, but they assure them that they'll be running some tests to find out. So with heavy hearts, of course, the family, they return back to Adam's home to support Teresa and her daughter and start going through the task of making funeral arrangements. At the house, Adam's 25-year-old brother Stanley turns to his wife and tells her that he's got a pounding headache. He says that he wants to go home and lie down and just rest for a bit. But Stanley's mum steps in and she gently persuades him to stay so the whole family can be together in one place. Teresa helps him upstairs. On the kitchen counter, she notices a fresh bottle of extra strength Tylenol, the same one that Adam had picked up earlier that day. She hands Stanley 2 capsules and then takes 2 capsules herself, since obviously she's starting to feel a bit unwell as well. Minutes later, Stanley begins clutching at his chest. He collapses too. As he hits the floor, he immediately starts convulsing. Foam again is gurgling out of his mouth, his eyes rolling in the back of his head. Obviously, the family is in full-on panic. They call for an ambulance, and when the paramedics hear the address, they're like, this is the second emergency call to this house in a single day, where the first man they know had already died.
Shit. I guess they've all fallen unwell before they've taken the Tylenol. So therefore, I guess someone could suspect, oh, there is some weird bug or something else that's going around, right?
Oh, yeah. I'm loving your intuition here. Fire Lieutenant Chuck Kramer, he orders that a fire engine tail the ambulance just in case this turns out to be something bigger, right? When the paramedics arrive, they begin CPR on Stanley. As this is happening, Teresa suddenly grabs Fire Lieutenant Chuck's shoulder. She groans, drops to the floor, and immediately she begins convulsing just like Stanley. At this point, Chuck's alarm bells are blaring. He's thinking that these are not heart attacks. He thinks that maybe there's some kind of carbon monoxide leak in the house, or worse, maybe some kind of airborne contagion.
Yeah.
Chuck then orders everyone in the house, all the Janus family members and the paramedics, to be moved into police cars for an emergency escort to the hospital. He then radios ahead and tells them that they need to prepare a quarantine area because something is just not right in this house. Back at the hospital, Dr. Thomas Kim, he's just about to head out for the day when a nurse rushes over to him and says, like, the Janus family are being brought back in. And at first he assumes that maybe something's happened to Adam's parents. Maybe they've had a panic attack or they fainted from grief or whatever. But the nurse says to him, no, it's actually Adam's brother and his wife, people. Stanley and Teresa, they're rushed to ICU while the rest of the family, along with the paramedics, are escorted into an empty family room and placed under observation. No one knows what the hell is going on. There are nurses rushing around, securing the area. They're putting on all their personal protective equipment. People are literally crying. It's full on panic. It's so bad, Adam, that the family requests a priest come and read them their last rites. That is how dire this is feeling in this moment.
I mean, this poor family, like in the space of 24 hours, what must they be thinking? Like, I can't even imagine the situation.
So meanwhile, Dr. Kim and his team are running around trying to kind of figure out any possibility that they can think of that might be causing this. At first, again, they think it might be carbon monoxide poisoning, but the symptoms, Adam, they just do not add up.
And I guess there's other family members there which are not sick. They would have been exposed to the carbon monoxide if there was poisoning. Yeah.
Exactly. Next, they think maybe it might be botulism, food poisoning. Again, the symptoms just do not add up, right? There's no vomiting or anything.
Yeah, foaming of the mouth. I would never want food poisoning that does that.
They then start leaning towards something that Chuck maybe suspected, that maybe it was some sort of airborne contagion. Something that maybe the whole family and now the paramedics have all been exposed to. If that is the case, of course, they now need to act fast to make sure that no one affected comes into contact with any vulnerable patients in the hospital.
Sure.
Immediately, they seal off the ward. Hours go by, and Lieutenant Chuck has been stuck in quarantine with the rest of the family, just completely helpless. So he picks up the phone and he calls someone that he knows that he can trust. It's a woman called Helen Jensen. She's basically a public health nurse in the local community. Within 15 minutes, Adam, boom, Helen comes storming through the hospital doors. Staff immediately try to stop her. They're like, whoa, like, hang on, woman. We have no idea what's in there. We don't know how dangerous it is. But Helen doesn't even blink. She just walks straight in. No gloves, no gown, no mask, just pure bravery.
Yeah.
Would you do that? Would you walk in?
I don't know if there's a doubt of what's going on and you haven't proven that there isn't like an airborne virus or something. I don't know if I would.
No, I'd be like, fuck you guys. I'm out of here. So she has Adam's wife walk her through everything that Adam did that morning, just trying to piece it all together. She then clocks something that everyone else has missed. All 3 people had gotten sick after taking the Tylenol. So she's right on this, like immediately.
Yeah, like smart. I mean, that is the common denominator. And I guess if you did sit everyone down and go, what did you do today? I think you would land on that pretty quickly.
But at the same time, Tylenol or paracetamol is such a common, typical thing that everyone has in the household. It's amazing that they even picked up on that, right? Like, I wouldn't mention that I'd taken the Tylenol.
I know, but if someone said, "Oh, I felt sick and I went to lay down," I guess someone would go, "Well, did you take anything for that?"
Sure, clever
Yeah.
thinking.
See, I could be a detective.
So Helena's like, I need to check this out. She asked for the keys to the Janus family home and she asked for a police officer to drive her there. Now, people do say in the story that Helen was extremely brave, but I honestly believe she was a little bit fucking bonkers because basically she's like, take me to the house where there could be some kind of airborne contagion. Because right now, the Tylenol is just a theory, right? It could still be Ebola in the air.
Yeah, that's a fair point. They haven't proven it at this point. But I don't know. You do see these shows where you see these kind of crazy cops and whatever. Like, I don't know, they're a little bit like, don't follow the rules.
Here's the difference.
Okay.
It's a TV show.
But TV is based on real life.
Okay, fair enough. I don't know. I wouldn't have been so quick to visit the house, but she must have been very confident.
I would have
that
gone
it
in
was
like a
Tylenol.
hazmat suit or something like that.
Yeah, no, she doesn't.
Mm.
So around 8 p.m., Helen arrives at the Janus family home. She starts gathering everything that she thinks that Adam, Stanley, and Teresa might have come in contact with. She grabs the pot of coffee that everyone's been drinking from that morning. She grabs the flowers that Adam had bought earlier that day, and she collects up some fruitcake that they'd all been eating. Then she finds, of course, the 50 capsule bottle of Tylenol sitting right there on the counter. And she also finds the receipt because, of course, as we know, it was purchased earlier that morning. She knows now exactly where it was bought and what time. Basically, what she's going to do, she's going to go off for a refund. She's like, let's kill 3 people.
Yeah.
I think I could at least get a partial refund.
Or like store credit. I mean, I'm guessing that the thinking behind that is you go to the store that it was delivered to, you can then find the batch and everything like that and can then connect.
My God, you're so good at this. Yes. So she opens up the bottle. She counts that there's 44 capsules left, which obviously stacks up. The Janus family took 6 between them. So now she's almost certain that all the pills that they took came from this bottle.
Mm-hmm.
Helen then heads straight back to the hospital. And when she gets there, Adam, she's hit with the awful news that Stanley has now passed away.
Shit.
So he's gone. Teresa, however, she's still critical. She's in a coma. Helen marches straight over to the medical examiner's office and she tells them flat out, I'm telling you, Tylenol is the link. It's the only connection in all 3 of these cases. But sadly, Adam, remember, this is the 1980s. Helen is just a nurse. So, of course, her warnings are just met with complete skepticism. They're like, Helen, is it? And they're like, yeah, I don't think so. So basically, in the end, Helen goes home frustrated. She knows what's going on, but just no motherfucker is listening to her.
All we need to do is just go like, just test this product. All we need to do is just test it.
At this moment, they're not. They're like,
Waste of time or whatever.
but also got to think about how unlikely that must seem as well. This is so unprecedented. This has never happened before.
Yeah, in hindsight, we know obviously what the issue is.
So that same night, over at Arlington Heights, Lieutenant Philip Capelli from the fire department, he gets a phone call. It's from his mother-in-law, Marge. She tells him that her neighbor's daughter, Mary Kellerman, has suddenly died that morning. And she asks him if he knows what happened. Basically, she's looking for gossip.
Okay.
Philip has no idea. So he rings a friend of his, a guy called Richard Keyworth. He works in the jurisdiction where the girl had died. Richard tells him that around 6:30 that morning, 12-year-old Mary Kellerman had woken up complaining of a sore throat, runny nose, and a headache. Her parents, Dennis and Gina Kellerman, decide that she might need to stay home from school that day. They give her 1 extra strength Tylenol, and Mary goes back to bed. A short while later, Dennis hears a thud coming from the bathroom. When he runs in, Mary has collapsed and she's unconscious on the floor. They call paramedics. When they arrive, Mary is in full-on cardiac arrest. And at 9:56 a.m. that same morning at Alexia Brothers Medical Center, Mary is pronounced dead and she is 12 years old.
Poor girl.
Once again, of course, the doctors, they determined that the cause of her death was another fucking heart attack, likely caused by some undiagnosed kind of medical condition that she might have had.
But then with the convulsing, they don't know all the symptoms of heart attacks, but it just seems odd.
It does. So odd. So over the phone, Richard tells Philip that the paramedics had made a note that Mary had taken Tylenol just before she collapsed. But at this time, remember, like Tylenol is just a normal, widely used over-the-counter pain reliever, so no one thinks anything of it. This is just background noise.
And how far away was this family to the other family?
The same town, different borough, within 20 miles of
Yeah.
each other. But as Philip is hearing all of this over the phone, something starts nagging at him because he remembers earlier that day he had overheard a series of reports coming out of the Arlington Heights area. As we know, 3 other young people had suddenly gone into cardiac arrest as well. So he says to Richard, I know this sounds crazy, but do you think that maybe the Tylenol might be the link between these 4 cases? So what's incredible here is that we now have 2 people who have managed to quickly piece this together, potentially, when everyone else has so far dismissed it.
Yeah. And what does Richard say?
So basically, Richard and Philip, they call Northwest Community Hospital. They tell them about Mary Kellerman and they say, look, I know this is a long shot, but what if the Tylenol is to blame? Of course, This then sounds the alarm for them too, because earlier that day, Helen Jensen had made the same assertion, right? So they arranged for the Tylenol bottle from Mary Kellerman's house to be taken to the hospital. It's handed over to the medical examiner, a guy called Nicholas Pishos. And right away, something catches his attention, right? Both bottles were both the extra strength variety of Tylenol. Both originally contained 50 capsules, and both were purchased from 2 different dual supermarkets in the area. But also, both had the exact same batch number, MC2880.
It's a dodgy batch.
It's a dodgy batch, right? So not convinced that this is just a coincidence, Nicholas calls his boss. It's a guy called Dr. Edmund Donahue. Edmund says, right, I want you to open up the bottle and give it a sniff. So Nicholas is like, okay, weird, but sure. He pops open the lid, he takes a cautious sniff, and immediately he gets a whiff of strong, bitter almonds. So like that marzipan smell.
And I'm guessing that's unusual for this
What
drug.
do you think that indicates?
Well, I don't know if bitter marzipan would say, oh, this is off, but I'm guessing it's very different to what he is expecting to smell.
So if you know your chemistry, you know that this is a positive indication for cyanide.
Bitter almonds. That sounds quite nice.
I'd be like, I would take 4.
Yeah.
Terrifying. So he tells Nicholas to send the Tylenol immediately for lab testing. When the pills are examined more closely, they notice something else. So these are the old school capsules that come in 2 halves. One side is white, one side is red.
So there's a plastic type capsule.
Yeah, it's gelatin essentially.
Yeah. Okay.
So one side of those is slightly discolored and a little bit more swollen. It's the red portion of it. When they crack it open, instead of the normal brilliant white powder that you'd expect, it was instead like really grey, moist and lumpy.
If it's wet and clumpy, that doesn't sound like a regular drug or anything, does it?
No, it doesn't. It doesn't take long for the lab to confirm that the capsules did indeed contain cyanide, just as Nicholas's boss had confirmed. And Adam, I'm not talking about trace amounts. Like these capsules were packed full of cyanide.
It feels any small amount of cyanide is surely dangerous.
Yeah, so for context, it takes just 5 to 7 micrograms of cyanide to kill a single person, right? Each one of these contaminated capsules contained 65 milligrams. So basically that is 10,000 times the lethal dose to kill a human being in just one capsule.
Bloody hell. And they were taking chew as well, weren't they?
That's right. So meanwhile, over at the Northwest Community Hospital, Dr. Kim is still trying to work out what the hell is happening with Stanley and Teresa. At this point, he's starting to suspect an overdose of Tylenol.
So he doesn't know anything about cyanide at this point.
No idea. But what is incredible is that Dr. Kim is close, right? He is sniffing around the area. He is suspecting that it is the Tylenol. But again, the symptoms, they just don't add up. Everything that he's seeing, everything that he's reading, everything is pointing to one thing, and that is cyanide poisoning. But he is adamant, this is way too unlikely. It's just not possible. Because really, who suspects that it's going to be cyanide in your Tylenol? Eventually, he gives into his instincts. He decides, all right, I need to test for what the science are telling me, even if this sounds absurd. But they don't have the equipment to actually run those tests in the hospital. So what he does is he draws some blood from Stanley and Teresa. He then sends him to a 24-hour lab in Highland Park. And because obviously time is absolutely critical trying to save Teresa's life, they can't wait till morning. So he does the only thing he can think of, and he sticks the blood samples in a cab. Which, I mean, imagine that cab driver. Like, you're out there trying to make rent, someone just hands you 2 vials of blood in the middle of a potential public health crisis.
Yeah, I don't know what you think, because do you think like an airborne virus, is that what the cab driver could be thinking? Or
I don't know if he even knows the details, but
Yeah.
even still, it must be weird as a cab driver being handed 2 vials of blood and saying, take this to this lab to be tested immediately.
Yeah, that would
I'd be
be a
like,
bit
why?
concerning.
Tell me.
They just want a cholesterol test. Don't worry, nothing.
Can't I wait till morning? No. So eventually the tests come back, and just like the Tylenol capsules, it's confirmed it's cyanide. Which is amazing, again, when you zoom out, because now you've got multiple professionals all working separately, all chasing different threads, but somehow all landing on the same terrifying answer, all very, very quickly.
And how quickly is this? Because is this within a day, 2
This
days?
is all the same day.
Good, smart people.
And here's the wild bit, because remember Nicholas, the medical examiner, who opened up the bottle and took a sniff and could smell those bitter almonds? Well, this is extremely lucky, because it turns out that only 60% of people can actually detect that smell. So if he had taken a sniff and gone, there's nothing there, then that whole triage of links between the Tylenol, the batch numbers, and the stores where they were purchased from just wouldn't have happened, at least not that night.
Wow.
So there's so many kind of really lucky connections that are happening here. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, it was really lucky that he was the one to do that at this point in time. It's all like the jigsaw pieces are kind of fitting together.
And by the way, do you know what cyanide actually does to your body when you ingest it?
I'm guessing it kills you.
Adam, yes. I'd say that's safe.
But I have no idea what it actually does to the body there.
So basically, cyanide works by blocking your body's ability to absorb oxygen. The switch just gets switched off First, you start feeling nauseous, then come headaches, dizziness, and then confusion. Then after that, you get shortness of breath because your lungs are basically just starved, right? Your skin ends up turning this cherry red color because oxygen is building up in your body. It's there. It just can't be used by your cells. Then your heart and your brain, the two organs that absolutely depend on that oxygen, they start shutting down. You go into cardiac arrest. And if that doesn't kill you, the seizures will. And if somehow you still are hanging on, it's 100% fatal. So basically, you will eventually die. It is so grim.
So it doesn't matter that Teresa is in intensive care. She's not going to make it.
What we're going to find out is that Teresa is essentially brain dead.
So that's horrendous. Who would do this?
So here's the thing. If this has all been linked to a basic over-the-counter painkiller, this is not just alarming, it's absolutely catastrophic. Just to give you a bit of perspective of the scale of the panic that is about to erupt, in 1982, Tylenol was Johnson & Johnson's best-selling non-prescription medication, one of the most popular over-the-counter remedies in the entire United States, literally dominating 37% of the market share. And each year they were putting $400 million of sales just from that one product alone, which means a huge percentage of American households have Tylenol sitting in their bathroom cabinets.
And I'm guessing this is the reason why this particular product was targeted, because it was so common and widely used.
I guess, assuming that it's someone targeting this product and tampering with them, then yeah, I guess you're going to pick the most popular one to get the most victims. But also, this is huge for Johnson & Johnson because as a business, Tylenol accounts for 1/5 of their entire product revenue. So if this story gets out, what do you think they're going to do?
I see two things happening. One, they're going to deny it.
Yeah.
And two, if it did get out, then I don't think anyone's going to trust Tylenol ever again.
No, 100%. But exactly as you said, they're probably not going to want this to get out. So I imagine a huge company like Johnson & Johnson lawyering up just to silence anyone that they possibly can.
Yeah, and sadly, I think that's probably what's going to happen. And equally, they could say, oh, it was just a small batch, and then just hush everyone else. Then it doesn't get widespread.
So the first time the story actually breaks, it's through a news bulletin board at the City News Bureau. It's like an internal wire service for Chicago journalists. They get a tip that a popular over-the-counter painkiller may have caused 3 violent and sudden deaths. They don't say it's Tylenol by name, probably for litigation concerns. So a local journalist is desperately trying to get the confirmation of all the facts before they can officially launch the story. Eventually, the medical examiner's office says they are actually attributing 3 of the deaths to Tylenol itself. And in that moment, he gets really nervous because he suddenly remembers that he has a mate who relies on Tylenol for his knee injury. So he immediately picks up the phone, he calls him, no hesitation, and says, whatever you do tomorrow morning, do not take your Tylenol because something big is kicking off.
Wow. What happens if he's like, I've just taken some?
Just taken it. Spit it out, spit it out. By 5:30 a.m., local news stations pick up the story immediately. One of them is a station that Helen Jensen's husband listens to every morning before work. He wakes up Helen and says, like, you were right. Of course, 1980 gender dynamics at play. It just took a couple of men confirming it before anyone else actually believed her. But hey, at least it wasn't weeks or months before she was eventually proven right.
Yeah, she had an inclination, and she's a nurse, right? Yeah. Did she know it was cyanide, or did she just know it was poisoning and it was Tylenol?
I think she just knew it was Tylenol. She didn't know that it was actually cyanide. But it's a good logical thinking, right?
Well, yeah, you're taking a medication that's made you ill. Yeah, it's going to be that, right?
This bit's really incredible because almost immediately the entire community mobilizes. Local public health departments, they start going door to door with flyers, warning people to get rid of their Tylenol. Police cars drive through the neighborhoods with bullhorns blaring, ordering people to just throw out their bottles of Tylenol. Churches send out Boy Scouts canvassing neighborhoods to spread the word. Stores across the district then start pulling all the Tylenol off of their shelves, which in hindsight, Adam, is absolutely life-saving because when investigators go through the returned stock, they find 3 more tainted pills. Luckily, those pills hadn't been taken.
So only 3 then, which I'm not saying
that's
only
what they
3.
found. So many other people were chucking the Tylenol away.
Sure. So we don't actually know how many were actually infected.
That's right. At this point, Johnson & Johnson still have no idea that any of this is happening. It's not until a local journalist calls them up asking for comments on the 3 deaths that have been linked to their Tylenol product. And this is pretty much where they then freak out. They assemble a crisis team to figure out what the hell is going on and how they are going to respond, right? That's probably the most important thing for them. So like for me, my evil corporate spidey senses are just going off. You know that they're going to be trying to do something to cover this up.
Yeah, like crisis management.
But just when you think that this multi-billion-dollar company is about to lawyer up and start threatening people into silence, denying everything, and they do the opposite. They come out publicly and announce their commitment to protecting the public no matter what. They send company officials to meet with detectives to get all the facts straight. Once confirmed that it is the Tylenol, they immediately recalled 94,000 bottles with the matching batch number MC2880.
So they do put out a recall. That's good. I don't know. Is that enough, just that batch? I do wonder whether you'd be like, actually, should we just recall everything?
Well, I guess for the company, they don't want to withdraw anything that they don't need to. If they have to recall at all, that potentially permanently damages the brand.
Yeah, okay.
And of course, by this point, the entire country is in full-blown hysteria. Thousands of people started calling the local examiner's office, terrified that they might be in danger. Phone lines are just jammed. Everyone is asking the same thing. I took Tylenol. Am I going to die?
Yeah, because even with the information that it's a certain batch, do you really trust that just being that?
Could there be another batch affected?
And could it just be Tylenol or could it be other products? So I think there's going to be, a lot of fear, basically, and people trying to like deal with a common cold or aches and pains.
Yeah, for sure. Hundreds of people, of course, they start calling for ambulances, reporting symptoms of poisoning. Paramedics, obviously, they scramble to equip all their rigs with cyanide antidote kits. Of course, limited supply because this is unprecedented.
Oh, so there is an antidote for it then?
I have no idea. That's just what I've read. Who knows what the antidote is?
I wonder how successful it is as well, because if it's too far gone, it feels like you have no hope.
Yeah, and also the amount of damage that it does in a very short space of time, even if you do survive, like what's your quality of life going to be?
Yeah.
Will it have burnt out your esophagus? Who knows? People that don't get through to the emergency services, they start just showing up at hospitals in droves, completely overwhelming them. At this point, Adam, the fear is real and it's spreading fast. Meanwhile, Johnson & Johnson, they think that maybe this was an act of sabotage by maybe a disgruntled employee, perhaps. But that gets ruled out pretty quickly because most Tylenol production is done completely by machine, automated systems and conveyor belts. The entire process is like tightly sealed off as well. So physically tampering with a capsule without being detected was like nearly impossible for anyone to do on the inside. So to make sure, they pulled the quality control sample from batch MC2880 from their wash to manufacturing plant to be tested. Adam, it's completely clean. There's no cyanide, there's no contaminants, nothing is out of place. They also confirmed that cyanide isn't even stored at their Tylenol manufacturing facilities at all, which means only one thing. The contamination couldn't have happened at the factory itself. It had to have happened once the bottles had actually left the plant.
I was just going to say, if it came out clean, that's the only way. And if they are capsules that you pull apart and there's powder, someone has painstakingly undid them all and then obviously contaminated it and then put them back. That's the only way. Because if it was like a regular pill or something like that, you'd have to be done within the plant.
While all this is unfolding, at 4 p.m. on Wednesday, the 30th of September, so this is the next day, 31-year-old Mary McFarlane, an office worker at the Illinois Bell telephone store in Yorktown Shopping Center, she starts complaining of a migraine, which is not unusual for her since obviously she suffered from them quite regularly. Now, at her workplace, they kept painkillers on hand for the staff, just a big jar, and you can just help yourself. Mary doesn't use them because she always carried her own supply. She had just picked up a 50 capsule bottle of extra strength Tylenol from the Woolworths 5 and Dime right there in the same shopping center that she worked. At 6:45 p.m., Mary steps into the break room, takes one of the capsules from her own stash. Less than 10 minutes later, she walks back into the break room. She is pale, she's feeling uneasy, and she tells her colleague, "I don't feel good." Then suddenly, she collapses, she starts convulsing, she's foaming at the mouth. Mary is rushed to the Good Samaritan's Hospital in nearby Downers Grove, and at 3:18 a.m. the next morning, Mary's gone. She's dead.
And so the news didn't make it to her, I'm guessing. Because you'd think if there was like this fear across the town, then it'd be all over the news, it'd be in the newspapers. But I guess there's only been a short window of time. Maybe it doesn't spread. Like if we had social media now, it would be everywhere, right?
I honestly believe if it had been just a few more hours, she would have then known.
Yeah.
When detectives search her belongings, they find her tin in her purse where she kept a little stash. Inside there are 10 Tylenol capsules. 5 of them contained cyanide. They then go to Mary's house to see if they can trace the bottle where the pills came from. And sure enough, in her bathroom cabinet, they find the bottle of extra strength Tylenol with just 1 capsule left. Inside, they test it. It's laced with cyanide. Here's the spanner in the works, though. When they check the batch number, it's not the same batch number as the others. This one is 1910MD. On top of this, Adam, this particular bottle was manufactured at a Johnson & Johnson's Texas-based plant, so a completely different facility altogether. So now, any theory that this was a one-off contaminated shipment was completely out the window, which is now fucking terrifying, right?
Yes, although not to say that it isn't terrifying, could it be, considering she carries capsules in a tin with her, that she's filled another bottle?
Could be.
I'm
But
just
then where's the original bottle?
true, yeah. But I was just thinking you either go, okay, well, we need to pull all batches, or actually just the way that she carried it would make me question that a little
Yeah,
bit.
sure. And I think it's getting that way. Now that multiple batches have been confirmed, it's definitely a possibility that Johnson & Johnson are going to do a nationwide recall of all Tylenol products. But because there's now multiple batches, it does seem that someone is physically targeting the product itself and not just a faulty batch.
Yeah.
But something is about to happen that is really going to make this very confusing. Because on the same afternoon that Mary McFarlane took the Tylenol and collapsed at work, across town, 27-year-old Mary Rayner, so her third Mary now, she was at home caring for her 3 young kids and her 6-day-old baby. When the hospital discharged Mary, they'd given her like a little recovery kit, the kind of like basic supplies to help with postpartum healing and stuff like that. Among those supplies was a blister pack of 8 extra strength Tylenol capsules. Basically, that is sealed in foil, right? Even back then in the 80s.
Right, okay.
If you had popped one of those pills out to contaminate it, you're going to know that someone had opened those blister packs, right?
Right.
So 6 days after being discharged, Mary takes 2 of the capsules from the sealed blister pack, and within minutes, she starts feeling dizzy, nauseous. She collapses. 6 hours after Mary McFarlane died, Mary Rayner succumbed to the exact same fate. And when investigators look at the remaining 6 capsules in that blister pack, every single one of them contained cyanide.
Well, this just makes it feel like it must be someone on the inside, right, to be able
Got
to do
to be. What the fuck is happening? And this is one of the most perplexing aspects of this entire investigation. Because remember, Johnson & Johnson confirmed that contamination must have been carried out by someone outside of the factory. But this was now a contaminated blister pack. Any tampering would have been obvious, but there's just no signs. And this means it must have left the factory with the cyanide in it. And so now suspicion was firmly back on Johnson & Johnson and their manufacturing process.
Did they do a cover-up, or did they not investigate it properly?
Feels like it, doesn't it? To make matters even worse, any hope of tracing any other blister packs back to their batch number is completely gone, because the hospitals, they issued an emergency order to destroy all Tylenol in their possession. So they're fucked. How can they know what batch was affected from these blister packs?
Yeah.
They can't. On the same day that Mary McFarlane and Mary Rayner took their Tylenol, around 8:45 p.m., 35-year-old Paula Prince, a flight attendant for United States Airlines, touches down at O'Hare International Airport in Chicago. She was hanging around the terminal. She's waiting for her friend and colleague, Jean. They basically live in the same apartment building together. The plan was to head home together and maybe grab a drink and maybe grab something to eat. But when Paula checks the arrival board, Jean's flight is delayed by 1 hour. So Paula scribbles down a quick note saying, "I'm heading home. Let's meet up for a drink later. I have some really exciting news to tell you." On the way home, Paula stops at a local Walgreens to grab a few things. Amongst them, she picks up a bottle of extra strength Tylenol. Back home, she's busy taking off her makeup. Paula pops a single capsule from the new bottle. And this is where it's really brutal, because she already had an open bottle of Tylenol in a travel bag. But for whatever reason, she just opens this new one. And because she was at home alone, we can only assume that she lands the same fate as the others, because it's not until 2 days later, on Friday, October the 1st, that her body is discovered by her sister Carol and Jean.
Bloody hell.
This is the most brutal part, because at Paula's funeral, a man approaches Jean and introduces himself. And he tells her that he's heard so much about her and that he's been really excited to meet her. He says that he and Paula had met during a layover in Las Vegas, and they'd fallen madly and deeply in love, and they were planning on getting married. That exciting news that Paula mentioned in her note to Jean, that was it.
Right. I thought you were about to say he was the potential killer.
Yeah, I figured
but-
you might think that. No, he was the exciting news that she wanted to tell Jean about. And there are just so many other details in the story that are just like these emotional gut punches, moments that if they'd just gone ever so slightly different, things that might have changed. For example, if Stanley Janus was allowed to go home that night instead of staying over, he and Teresa might have survived, right? If Mary McFarlane had taken a pill from the staff communal supply, she might have then seen the news later that night and then thrown out her bottle.
Yeah.
But then also with Paula, she already had a bottle of Tylenol in her bag. If she had reached for that one instead, again, would she have seen the news and then just thrown out her bottle the next day?
That's the thing. Like, there's all these different tangents of how or what could happen.
Yeah. It feels like sliding doors, doesn't it? Well, oh, you miss your train and then all of a sudden your life goes onto a completely different trajectory.
Yeah. And I guess there's all these people that probably did have a lucky escape because they either did hear the news or they did take a batch that was actually okay.
Yeah. And sadly, we don't ever hear about them, do we? It's crazy.
So this is all in the same town still, right?
All in Chicago. Yeah. All around the same area, pretty much within 2 or 3 days of each other. But on the same day that they find Paula's body on the 1st of October across town, doctors have to make the heartbreaking decision to take Teresa Janus off of life support because essentially she's declared brain dead. Adam, she's just 19 years old. And that now brings the total up to 7.
So we know there's several batches that have been impacted, whether in bottles or whether in the blister packs. Do these batches just go to a specific city? Because I'm just trying to work out why
they
Chicago.
don't. So they get distributed all over the country. And that's the interesting thing here, right? Because this also proves that it couldn't have been from a particular batch because other areas around the United States would have been affected because they get distributed everywhere. But it's just in the Chicago area.
So does someone know if a batch or part of a batch is going to Chicago versus LA?
I don't think so, no. They just get divided up. They go who's ordering what.
Yeah.
They don't probably even think about batches at that point. That's just a manufacturing thing, right?
Yeah, because I'm just trying to work out how is someone able to just target all of Chicago? Do we find out, I'm guessing?
We're going to find out, yes. But another wrench in the investigation comes when investigators check the batch number for Paula's Tylenol. Again, it's different. This one is 1801MA. Just like Mary Rayner's blister pack, this one also originated from Johnson & Johnson's Texas manufacturing plant. So now they're looking at 3 separate batch numbers, 2 different manufacturing locations, and absolutely no clear pattern. Just 7 innocent people randomly poisoned by a product that they trusted. So investigators, they start combing through the evidence tied to Paula Prince's case. They find a receipt from the Walgreens where she bought the Tylenol. Naturally, you think they'll check the CCTV footage. But remember, this is 1982, so stores didn't actually have aisle cameras yet. So basically, there's no way to see how the Tylenol bottles got on the shelf in the first place. But there was one camera mounted at the front of the store near the ATM. This was one of those old school kind of setups that kind of takes a single photo every time someone withdraws cash from the ATM. It had captured an overview of the checkout where Paula was seen purchasing her Tylenol. In the background of that image, just a few feet behind her, there's a white man with a beard, thinning hair, standing facing directly towards her. He sort of looks like he's looking directly at Paula. It is a fairly creepy image. It's creepy enough for the cops to kind of wonder, could this potentially be the killer watching her buy the bottle of Tylenol that is just tampered with?
Okay, so I understand. What we're saying is that someone is perhaps going into stores because there's no clue with the batch numbers and the 2 different locations that they're made. Someone's physically going into stores, replacing bottles of Tylenol on the shelf with ones that they've tampered with. Okay, so that makes sense how it's targeted the Chicago area.
Yes.
But how does it work with the blister pack?
Exactly. That is the biggest mystery of this entire case. So yeah, we now have multiple batches contaminated, including blister packs. Johnson & Johnson, they now obviously announce a total nationwide recall of all Tylenol products. And Adam, I cannot understate how huge this is. There are an estimated 31 million bottles of Tylenol in circulation across the United States, all with different batch numbers. So this recall is going to cost Johnson & Johnson $100 million, which is $300 million in today's money.
That's a lot of money.
They announced that they're going to completely stop all production of Tylenol and they pull all their ads from circulation. That's billboards, TV commercials, magazines, it's all gone. Then to get the word out fast, they send out 450,000 teletext messages to doctors' offices, hospitals, pharmacies, and trade groups, ordering the immediate destruction of any Tylenol still on their shelves. The CEO then goes on national television. He announces that Johnson & Johnson will not manufacture another capsule of Tylenol until they can develop tamper-proof packaging. He announces that they're also putting up a $100,000 reward that leads to any arrest or conviction of whoever has been doing this, basically. They're convicted in believing that someone, exactly as you said, is going into these stores, taking the Tylenol off the shelf, and then replacing them with cyanide-laced pills, essentially. Years later, in an article in the Washington Post, they write that Johnson & Johnson effectively demonstrated how a major business ought to handle disasters like this when they unfold, so much so that this case is still studied in PR classes at universities all around the world. It's widely considered a textbook example of how to handle a corporate crisis. They literally say it couldn't have been handled any better because of how they were putting the consumer first, which is just so rare, isn't it? We don't see this enough with these big organizations.
I mean, you'd hope they would if it's an actual pharmaceutical company, which I know there are potentially some out there which don't do that. But you would hope someone like Johnson & Johnson, which has this huge reputation and is so big, like if they didn't do that, it's going to be far more damaging.
Sure.
And all the deaths across America. Can you imagine how much worse this could have been had they not have done that?
Yeah, 100%. It's terrifying. And this is now considered, Adam, a mass murder investigation. They bring in over 100 investigators from 15 different agencies. This is one of the first high-profile cases in which the FBI employ a new technique called criminal profiling. Like something that feels very familiar to us now, thanks to shows like Mindhunter. Back then, this was just completely cutting edge.
So they pulled together a criminal profile. What character traits or type of person are they looking for?
Listen, it's not that sophisticated. Basically, they think they're looking for a man.
Okay, so largely 50-50 sort of a selection there.
You say 50-50, but remember, most poisonings are typically carried out by women, right?
Are they?
Yeah, typically that's like a woman's MO. Like if you cross a woman, she's going to poison the shit out of you.
Name 25 women that have poisoned people.
I'm sure we have some certified freaks who will write in. But the difference here is that women typically target people that they know, right? So like revenge. Like you've crossed me, I'm going to get you. Whereas obviously men typically kill random victims, which is what this seems to be. They also reckon that it's likely someone with obviously mental health issues, possibly a history of animal cruelty. They even raise the possibility of multiple people being involved, since some of the capsules seem to have been put back together better than others.
Okay.
While all this is going on, Johnson & Johnson deliver a huge bombshell. They come forward and they admit that, oopsie, we lied. We actually do store potassium cyanide in some of our facilities, but they say that there's only used for chemical testing in the lab, specifically for testing the primary binding agent within Tylenol itself. They insist, though, that those labs are in completely separate locations of the manufacturing areas, and that they are certain that if cyanide had made it into the production line, then it would have been detected within their quality control samples. Plus, by this point, contaminated bottles had shown up in 2 different plants on opposite sides of the country. So they say even with cyanide in these labs, contamination at the manufacturing level seems highly unlikely, meaning that whoever was responsible would have needed to have access to both separate manufacturing plants at the same time, which was impossible without having to sign in and get clearance into those locations.
Unless they say that there's 2 people working in cahoots.
Possibly, which is why investigators, they go ahead, they interview every single current and former employee. They interview their friends, their family, everyone even remotely connected to the Tylenol production chain process in any way. And nothing turns up. There's no suspects. There's no red flags. No one seems to be capable of putting something like this.
There's no new dodgy janitor that's just turned up.
Nothing. It's weird. So the cops confirm that obviously tampering must have happened after the Tylenol had been shipped to Illinois. Now, I know that we still have that issue with the blister packs, but they insist that this theory only makes sense if you completely ignore the blister pack. If you don't ignore it, then the only way that blister pack could have been contaminated would have been during the manufacturing process. Either that or the killer worked really, really hard to do a convincing job of contaminating those capsules and then like really kind of gluing down the foil.
My other strand of thinking was, could they have a makeshift, I don't know, machine at home? But I'm guessing this foil probably has the pattern or the logo on it. So that's quite hard to produce, I would have thought, back in the early 80s. It's not like now that you could probably copy that quite easily.
But then also think about the blister pack, right? The blister pack came from the hospital. How would then a killer then get the blister pack into the hospital supply?
Because they're not going to be buying it from a local Walmart.
No, they're not, are they?
Yeah, I'm very confused.
But the cops, they decide that they need to ignore this because of the fact that all of the other poisonings were confined to the Chicago area. If it was contaminated at the plant, then those affected batches would have made it to multiple regions around the USA, which seems like an impossible coincidence if that was the case. So somewhere between arriving in Illinois and reaching the store shelves, the Tylenol was somehow tampered with before it physically got into someone's hands. So investigators, they start to interview every single employee connected to all the affected stores. This includes cashiers, stockroom workers, janitors, delivery drivers, maintenance staff. But after countless interviews, Adam, all the different background checks, no arrests are made. So what is going on?
Yeah, 'cause all I could think of was it's either like a man going into all these different stores and doing it manually, which feels like probably a lot of work. But I imagine someone that's quite sadistic and doing this in the first place might take quite or satisfaction in planting them himself.
100%.
Or you've got maybe a delivery driver or something like that's doing it in the back of his lorry that's changing the capsules. But the blister pack, that's the only thing I don't know. Is it like a red herring almost?
So, Adam, let's take a quick break. And when we come back, we're going to dive into some of the suspects and theories in this case. And maybe among them will be the actual killer.
I hope so.
Are you feeling overwhelmed by hormonal changes? If you're a woman, you're not alone. With over 1,000 hormone disruptors in our environment, it's no wonder things can feel out of balance. On top of that, natural changes like PMS, menopause, and other life stages can leave you feeling tired, irritable, and trapped in a constant battle with your body. But here's the good news. You don't have to suffer through it. Hormone Harmony by Happy Mammoth is here to help. This herbal formula fine-tunes your hormones, balancing estrogen, testosterone, and even stress hormones like cortisol, which can contribute to weight gain, racing thoughts, poor sleep, and more. With over 40,000 five-star reviews and a bottle selling every 24 seconds, the results speak for themselves. Ready to feel like yourself again? For a limited time, get 15% off your first order at happymammoth.com using code NEXTCHAPTER at checkout. Visit happymammoth.com today and get your old self back naturally.
I can't tell you how often I hear, oh, I'm a little OCD. I like things neat. That's not OCD. I'm Howie Mandel, and I know this because I have OCD. Actual OCD causes relentless, unwanted thoughts. What if I did something terrible and forgot? What if I'm a bad person? Why am I thinking this terrible thing? It makes you question absolutely everything, and you'll do anything to feel better. OCD is debilitating, but it's also highly treatable with the right kind of therapy. Regular talk therapy doesn't cut it. OCD needs specialized therapy. That's why I want to tell you about NoCD. NoCD is the world's largest virtual therapy provider for OCD. Their licensed therapists provide specialized therapy virtually, and it's covered by insurance for over 155 million Americans. If you think you might be struggling with OCD, visit nocd.com to schedule a free 15-minute call and learn more. That's nocd.com.
So, Adam, we're back. What are you thinking?
I'm thinking I have no idea.
It's a troubling one, isn't it?
In some ways, I felt like I was on the right path with trying to work out what had gone on, but I just don't know. I just feel like it's clearly someone targeting the Chicago area,
Yeah.
but whether it's an employee of a shop or just some civilian or someone at Johnson & Johnson, I have no idea.
So one of the early theories was that maybe this was the work of a competitor or a rival of Johnson & Johnson trying to sabotage their best-selling product, which kind of makes sense to a degree. I mean, if you believe in sadistic corporate businesses, which I 100% do.
Yeah, but even still, that feels like a stretch that someone would go this far to take down another brand. Surely, slate them in the media, tarnish them, to actually kill people with cyanide. No.
So for a time, there was also even speculation that a major packaging manufacturer might have done this as a way to force the industry into adopting tamper-proof packaging. Because at the time, manufacturers were reluctant to adopt this due to obviously the increased costs that it came with. If so, this works because, as we know, this is exactly what happens in the fallout of this, right?
But even to say this is a business decision to do this in order to advance, are there examples of where businesses have killed people in order for gain like that?
This could be the first. It's just been covered up with good PR. Some speculate that the killer only intended to target one specific victim, then created a smokescreen with the other murders. And the idea was that if the killer only poisoned one bottle, the police might immediately link it to the killer and then catch on pretty fast, right? Now, it made me wonder, and look, I know this is dark and there's zero evidence of this, but maybe Mary Rayner's husband was the intended killer. Maybe he poisoned the blister pack, then went out and contaminated other bottles to make it seem like it was one of many. The police think that this is a possibility because they interview all the family members, friends, co-workers, anyone, even with the smallest possible connection. But in the end, everybody is cleared. But that is a theory that potentially makes sense to me. I get it, it's horrible, but it's serious enough for the police to go down that line of query.
Yeah, whether I believe it's him that did that, I don't know, but I can see how this could be a way to cover up another murder.
It out.
Yeah. So are we saying that within the blister pack, they found traces of cyanide in the other capsules which had not been split open?
Yeah, all of the 6 remaining capsules were stuffed with cyanide.
Okay, fine. Yeah, no, I can see it being a bit of a way as a decoy, but I don't think it's someone connected to the family.
Of course, a theory we've already alluded to is that the killer was local to the Chicago area, which is based purely on the distribution of the bottles. They reckon that the bottles had either been purchased or possibly shoplifted, then laced with cyanide, then put back on the shelves where someone would then grab them. But police never find any fingerprints, which leads to the theory that the killer might have worn gloves. And they use this to see if they can get anyone to jog their memory, because it was September at the time, so it was really warm. So they figured that if someone had seen someone wearing gloves in the supermarket in the middle of the day or in the evening or whatever, this might jog someone's memory. But again, nothing turns up.
And it sounds like there's quite a few stores that would have stocked this. In terms of going to like contaminate these bottles at certain stores, that's probably a lot of work and also a chance that you could reveal yourself if you're actually doing it. Whilst they didn't have great CCTV, it's just more of a risk.
A lot more chance that you'll be spotted if you're going across multiple stores.
So it feels like it could have been done before it got to the stores.
Based on the fact that the deaths all happened so close together and that Tylenol is such a big seller, investigators believe that the killer had contaminated the bottles in a single day. Likely the day before the poisoning started, just because how quickly Tylenol sells, right? Everyone has it. This is backed up by the fact that 2 police officers operating in a borough in Illinois, they had stopped at a local restaurant for lunch on Tuesday, September the 28th, so the day before the first death. They noticed 2 cardboard boxes near where they had parked. The boxes were clearly marked extra strength Tylenol capsules, and they could see that there were 24 bottles of Tylenol inside, and scattered all around on the ground was just a mess of white powder, and hundreds of empty red and white capsule casings just kind of littered the ground. Some of the capsules looked like they'd been taken apart and then put back together.
So that seems suspicious.
It does seem very suspicious, but get this. One of the officers, he picks up one of the bottles to investigate, but then shrugs it off, and then they both head inside to eat. But as they sat down, he starts getting a headache. Along with that, a rash starts developing down the length of his arm. Now, when they're leaving, the second officer goes and takes another look at the boxes, and soon after that, he starts to feel sick as well. Of course, at the time, they don't think anything of it, but when the news breaks, they rush, of course, to report what they had found. But weirdly, when those remnants were tested, there's no cyanide detected at all. So what was that?
That made them have that weird rash and feel ill.
The only explanation I can think of is potentially like mass hysteria, because remember, we've seen how this can spread, like in the Satanic Panic episode, right? But if this was the killer, then this might have been that moment that they were prepping those capsules, right? So by October the 2nd, the funerals had begun across Chicago for all of the victims, starting, of course, with the Janus family. Detectives stake out each of the different funerals just in case the killer couldn't resist to show up to inspect his handiwork. After the services were done, they then set up surveillance cameras around the different grave sites just to keep an eye on them, because there was this real feeling that someone as sadistic as this might want to kind of visit the grave sites to kind of see their victims, essentially. While all this is happening, on Wednesday, the 6th of October, an envelope arrives at the McNeil Consumer Products headquarters. McNeil's is basically a subsidiary of Johnson & Johnson, and the envelope had just one word scrawled across it: Tylenol. The letter inside read, "Gentlemen, as you can see, it is very easy to place cyanide, both potassium and sodium, into the capsules sitting on store shelves. And since the cyanide is inside the gelatin, it is easy to get buyers to swallow the bitter pill." How sadistic is that?
Yeah.
Another beauty is that cyanide operates quickly. It takes so very little, and there will be no time to take countermeasures. If you don't mind the publicity of these little capsules, then do nothing. So far, I've spent less than $50 and it takes me less than 10 minutes per bottle. If you want to stop the killings, then wire $1 million to bank account 844-9597 at Continental Illinois Bank, Chicago. Do not attempt to involve the FBI or local Chicago authorities with this letter. A couple of phone calls by me will undo anything that you can possibly do. At this point, the investigators are now facing 2 possibilities. Either this was a letter from the killer, or this is the work of a con artist, perhaps someone trying to capitalize on this tragedy.
Yeah, I didn't think about that, but that makes sense.
I mean, the detail that he knows about what cyanide does, especially in the 80s when there's no internet, right, is shocking. He's raised a very plausible explanation, an avenue of investigation that the police were already looking at, that it was a lone person.
How many like mass murderers issues like a ransom note or that kind of note basically to get money? I feel like they enjoy the killing so much. They just want the notoriety of what they've done. For asking for money though?
But this is an extortion attempt by the sounds of it. So the cops very easily, and I mean very, very easily, trace the postage to a travel agency in Chicago. Also, the bank account number in the letter is for an account that was closed 5 months earlier. So it wasn't even a well-planned extortion attempt. If anything, this looks like a setup.
Yeah. I was trying to work out why would they give it a bad bank account, but they're trying to basically, set up someone to take the fall for this.
The account belonged to a guy called Frederick Miller McKee. He was the heir to the Miller Brewing fortune, so why would he need to extort someone out of $1 million? He was already rich. The answer is he wouldn't, because the aim of the letter was to incriminate Frederick in the Tylenol murders. But why? Turns out that Frederick used to own the same travel agency that the letter was postmarked for, but the business had since gone under. But before it did, employees were complaining that Frederick wasn't paying them. One of those ex-employees that didn't get paid was a woman called Nancy Richardson. Her husband, a guy called Robert Richardson. He did not take kindly to the fact that Frederick was screwing over his wife. So investigators discover that Robert and Nancy are not even their real names. Their real names are James and Leanne Lewis. They dig a little bit deeper, and as they do, James Lewis starts to fit the FBI profile of the Tylenol killer almost perfectly. First of all, he grew up in a deeply unstable household. He was known to fly into these violent rages. At one time, he chases his mother with an axe. Another time, he beats his dad up so badly that he breaks a bunch of his ribs.
Well, that sounds like someone you don't want as a son.
He meets Nancy at university, and when they graduate, they get jobs as bookkeepers at a tax service. But James gets the sack after he goes into a violent rage at his boss. Of course, because he fears that he's going to get arrested, he and Leanne, they leave the state and go to Kansas, where they set up their own tax business. This is where they both meet their first client, a 72-year-old man named Raymond West. But in July of 1978, Raymond mysteriously disappears. And what is strange is that his car was still in his garage. So you don't disappear without your car, do you?
No, he's gone for a walk and got lost.
So when Raymond's friends start getting worried, the police carry out a search. And there they find Raymond's decomposed and dismembered body stuffed into a bin bag.
Oh.
A few weeks prior to Raymond going missing, he had withdrawn $5,000 and paid that money directly to James. When questioned, James just says it was a loan for a business expansion. But Raymond's family are like, Raymond would never give anyone a penny, not even us. He was to be extremely tight with his money. Police search James's house. They find 20 feet of knotted white rope and a bin bag filled with personal documents and checks, all belonging to Raymond. And so James is officially charged with Raymond's murder.
Yeah, I mean, he liked to wield an axe,
Yeah.
clearly, and this is what he's done.
So when this goes to court, James's defense attorney argues the original indictment was worded incorrectly. Apparently, they left out the word felonious, so I have no idea what that means.
And because they left it out, it meant that he could get away with it?
Essentially, so the judge throws the case out just like that. So after Raymond West's case collapses, the police are still hell-bent on trying to nail James for something, which is when they learn that James and Leanne had actually been involved in a lot of credit card fraud schemes. So they decide to try and get them on that. But surprise, surprise, they fled again. This is when they actually end up in Chicago operating under Robert and Nancy Richardson. As we know, Nancy started working at the travel agency where Frederick stiff her for the $500, right?
Right.
So a few years later, when the Tylenol deaths start hitting the headlines, James sees this as the perfect opportunity to try and frame Frederick and implicate him in the Tylenol murders as an act of revenge.
Ah, I see. So this criminal is just trying to get his own back. Yeah, well, that's really quite sad because he's taken away actual time from police investigating what's actually going on to investigating this guy who's just a bad boss.
Yeah, crazy. So the cops start looking for him through various aliases that he's used in the past. They pretty much link him to New York City, but they don't know where he is. They do know, however, that based on how much he seemed to know about the Tylenol killings in his letters, they figure that he's following the news very, very closely. So they come up with this really crazy idea. They place 24-hour surveillance cameras against all of the newsstands across New York City to try and catch him, right? Their hope is that he'll go pick up a paper and then they'll swarm in and catch him.
Okay.
But they get nothing. So then they wonder whether or not James might be reading the papers at the local library. So the cops reach out to every library in New York City and they ask the staff to be on the lookout. And eventually, on Monday, December the 13th, a library employee spots James reading a stack of newspapers, and that's how they arrest him. Isn't that just wild?
Yeah, I would never have thought that would lead to a library to think that's the way he's getting his information. But I'm guessing if he knows so much information, it's in the papers, it's perhaps not in the news on TV or whatever. Yeah, that's quite smart.
Crazy. Eventually, James admits to writing the letters to try and frame Frederick, but he insists, of course, it was never about getting the money.
Fine, but does he get charged with wasting police time then?
No, he actually gets charged with extorting the money, right? Regardless of what his intention was, he did attempt to extort the money.
Okay.
And he gets 20 years in federal prison.
Do they use his other crimes because of they couldn't pin him to the murder or anything? Because 20 years sounds quite a lot for extortion. Is it because of all of his past?
It's America, right? You mess with their money, they mess with your life.
Okay.
But the thing is, though, the cops, they are still 100% convinced that he is the Tylenol murderer. And they base this on the fact that he looks uncannily similar to the man that was caught on camera standing behind Paula Prince at the Walgreens store. And honestly, Adam, he really does. Like, you look that picture up on Google and it is eerie. But of course, this is not enough to charge him for the murders. After Mary Kellerman's funeral, that 12-year-old victim, the Chicago Tribune ran an article titled Living in the Tylenol Killer's Shadow. This was written by a columnist called Bob Green, and it wasn't your typical kind of think piece. It was a direct message to the killer, and it was designed to try and bait the killer into showing up at Mary's grave, which, of course, the cops had placed 24-hour surveillance cameras all around. The article begins, if you are the Tylenol killer, some of this may matter to you, or it may make no difference at all. But if you are the Tylenol killer, you must be harboring just the biggest curiosity about the people on the other end of your plan. The people who are unfortunate enough to purchase the bottles that you were touched. Already you can see what Green's trying to do here. He's kind of trying to tap into his ego, that twisted pride, that God complex.
And trying to lure him out, I guess.
Exactly. He then goes on to say, if you are curious, come to a small house on a quiet, winding street on Elk Grove Village, Illinois. The people who live there, Dennis and Gina Kellerman, feel that you have already been inside. He says, if you are the Tylenol killer, you should know one more thing. Mary's mother cannot have any more children. Mary was her only baby. She was born 1 month premature, and when she entered the world, her mother was scared because she wasn't crying. But the doctor smiled and said, it's all right, she's only sleeping. And she was. She was a quiet child. And because the Kellermans knew she would be their only child, she was especially precious to them. I mean, how do you even respond to that? Like, even reading that, that's quite stinging, isn't it?
Yeah, it really pulls on the heartstrings, doesn't it?
Green goes on to say, if you're wondering whether or not Mary's parents talk about you, you do not have to wonder anymore. They do. You've never been in their house, and yet they cannot walk into a room without feeling like you are there. You do not know them, but you've changed their lives forever. They feel like they can't get away from you, and you should know Mary's parents are too shattered to even visit her grave. Mary is buried at St. Michael's the Archangel in nearby Palatine, Illinois. And they wish they could go, but they can't. The hurt is too deep, and you are keeping them even from that.
Wow.
Powerful stuff, eh?
And are they revealing the location of Mary or where Mary is buried in order to try and see if he would go to the grave?
100%. That's the idea, yeah. They want to try and see if they can catch him in the act, maybe provoke the sense of guilt or even vanity, if you will. But here's the thing though, right? If the killer wanted to know where Mary was buried, I think they probably knew. They could probably have worked that out. Do you know what I mean? Especially if they were like meticulously following the details of the case.
Yeah, I guess that's assuming that they care that much about the victims or
I think
whether...
if you've gone to that extent to kill someone, then you probably do. If anything, I feel that this piece just reads like a trap. I would go, they want me to visit.
Yeah, I'm not falling for that.
Exactly. And that's the thing. No one ever visits that grave.
Yeah, I guess it was worth a shot though, right? Because they're hoping that this guy does have so much of an ego that he would just do that. He would slip up.
Worth a shot, but maybe if they hadn't said anything, maybe the killer would have gone and visited. And so, of course, in a completely predictable way, when something like the Tylenol murders makes national headlines, you know what's coming, right? Copycats.
Oh no, actually copying like poisoning medicine.
So in the months that followed, over 270 similar incidents were reported across the United States. People turned up to emergency rooms after taking pills laced with everything from rat poison to hydrochloric acid. In some cases, people even swallowed glass.
Bloody hell, that's a lot. 270.
People reported pins in Halloween candy. And the fear was so real that communities just cancelled Halloween entirely. And this is one of the origin kind of theories around where that fear that people were spiking Halloween candy came from, this case in 1982. But eventually, Tylenol does return back to the shelves, but it's not before Johnson & Johnson completely overhauled their packaging. They introduced basically a triple seal tamper-proof container, which, as we know it today, a glue kind of box outer carton. They also put the plastic seal over the neck of the bottle as well, like what we see with mouthwash, and the foil seal over the mouth of the bottle as well. And they also invent the caplet, which are those gel-coated capsule-shaped tablets that we recognize today, like precisely for that reason, to prevent anyone tampering.
Like a cod liver oil tablet. Kind of
Exactly.
thing. Yeah.
Yes, it's like a proper gelatin capsule. And because of the copycats striking other products too, this ends up becoming a global standard to issue tamper-proof evident protections on all sorts of products. This is why you have yogurt pots with the foil lids. Mouthwashes now come with a plastic seal around the neck of the bottle. Cosmetics products, they come with seals as well. All of this traces back to what happened in Chicago in 1982. It's really crazy how the world that we live in can be shaped by one incident that happened in the 1980s.
Yeah, and obviously several people died, which is really sad, but it's quite interesting how even just those deaths, not that they're insignificant, but they transformed a lot. They've now perhaps prevented other people or copycats or other things that could have gone wrong in the last sort of 30 to 40 years. That's now saved perhaps more people than we realize, as well as keeping your yogurts fresh.
Yeah, God forbid it will go bad. So another suspect that draws police attention is a 48-year-old dockhand named Roger Arnold. He worked at a warehouse just west of Chicago that actually supplied Jewel supermarkets, the same chain that, of course, we know sold Tylenol to Adam Janus and to Mary Kellerman's mum, Gina. In October 1982, Roger was drinking in a bar when he started talking about killing people with cyanide. The owner of the bar, a guy called Marty Sinclair, heard this and immediately calls the police.
It's like, well, that sounds like familiar.
Shouldn't there be like some kind of bar to customer confidentiality kind of rule?
I don't think that works there.
Doesn't work here.
It's more like counseling, but if you admit to killing someone...
Gonna call the police.
Yeah.
Anyway, the police raid Roger's apartment. They find a bunch of funnels, beakers, test tubes, and a mysterious bag of chemical powder. Naturally, they arrest him. He's questioned for 3 days, and the entire time he just says, obviously he denies everything, but he says, I'd like to be on the homicide of the guy that turned me in for what he did to me. That's his response.
Interesting response.
Turns out that the chemical powder was potassium carbonate. Now, it's completely harmless and is actually used in glass and soap making. Weirdly, Roger refuses to explain why he even had it in the first place, insisting that whatever he was doing with it was just not illegal, which to me says you're doing something illegal.
You just admit what you're doing. I'm making some soap. Just say that.
Yeah, just say soap. But without any evidence tying him to the murders, they just had to let him go. He becomes a complete and utter pariah in his local community. People start calling him the Tylenol kid. So all this resentment starts building up. And so the following summer, Roger drives back to the bar and at point blank range, he shoots a man called John Stanisha, a father of 3, as he was leaving the bar.
Is that the guy that dubbed him in?
He got the wrong guy. Roger was meant to kill Marty Sinclair, the bar owner, who reported him to the police. Instead, he killed an innocent man. And later, he ends up being convicted of second-degree murder, and he's sentenced to 30 years in prison, only serving 15.
Second-degree murder?
Oh, God, no. Maybe it's because he was not the intended victim.
No, but he still meant to kill someone.
But the thing is, though, in total, the cops end up identifying over 10,000 potential suspects, which is just wild.
10,000. And just to think the way that they had to log things back then, it's all probably written. They would have a computer, but not in the same way that you can easily search file, I imagine.
Exactly. And because, of course, they couldn't manually cross-reference that many names every time a new report came in, this case was actually one of the first criminal cases in the United States to use a computer program to process that suspect data. So it was designed to flag individuals who appeared across multiple police reports from different agencies, just to kind of find patterns that maybe investigators might have missed. But even this, Adam, they never find any new credible suspects outside of James and Roger Arnold.
Yeah, I mean, in some way, this has led them to arresting James. But I don't know, is there enough evidence of him, though?
Well, not really, no. Not really. By November 1982, of course, all the leads are dried up. The case goes completely cold. And as a result, the Tylenol task force is cut from 115 investigators down to just 50. And by March of 1983, there were just 10 full-time officers working on this case. But it does lead to one major change, because that same year, Congress passes a bill now known as the Tylenol bill, making it a federal crime to tamper with any consumer products. And the max sentence comes with a $100,000 fine and literally life imprisonment.
Is that for any tampering of products?
If that's the maximum sentence that they will push for. And the law is later used. In 1986, 2 people in Washington state died after taking Excedrin capsules laced with cyanide. So another copycat killer. People are just sick. Do you know what I mean? There's not even any originality there. Like, just come up with your own scheme rather than copying someone else. There's no pride in that. I mean, there's no pride in killing someone with cyanide anyway. But the fact that you're copycatting someone is just sick.
Yeah, I mean, just don't kill people.
9 years after the original Tylenol murders, the families of the 7 victims, they actually decide to sue Johnson & Johnson, arguing that product tampering was already a known issue before 1982 and that they should have introduced these different safety measures long before this tragedy even happened. And eventually they settle out of court. And some of that settlement money helps pay for the college education for the 8 children who'd lost kind of their parents during these murders. But officially, Johnson & Johnson always denied any responsibility, saying that they had nothing to do with the poisonings. Which I don't know. You still can't explain the blister packs, can you?
No.
You can't explain that.
I wonder if it was to happen now, whether it'd be easier to trace these batches that go out or where they get stored or anything like that. It feels like it's probably a lot harder to get away with that now.
Yeah.
And it's one of those things that you just perhaps, would any one of us suspected someone to ever do this up until that point? I think people, like you say, this is a safe medicine that people just take every day. No one would have ever thought that this would happen, I guess.
I don't think so either. It's just shocking. It's so scary. But the thing is, though, like they also settle out of court because they want this to disappear very, very quickly, right? When the murders first happened, Johnson & Johnson's market share was $5.4 billion. Afterwards, their Tylenol market share had crashed from 35% to just 8%. So settling out of court for them was just good business. But honestly, I think that just a lot of that is just PR done right, because don't forget, they initially lied about storing cyanide in their manufacturing facilities. How can you easily come back from that? I'm still not convinced they've answered one of the biggest questions of all, and that is, how did that cyanide end up in those blister packs? They were already in those foil sealed trays, tamper-proof by design. So that question, I think, will always stick with me as we leave this case behind, because if that is true, then the story might not just be about a lone killer that no one ever caught. It could be a huge corporate cover-up.
And negligence that they had.
Gross negligence.
And the thing is, it's not the first time Johnson & Johnson have come into controversy. I can't remember how many years ago it was the talc powder. So it's again, it's one of those things that's probably never intentional, or that probably was never intentional. Or did they know? It's just one of these things like, what have they done to cover their back?
Yeah.
You know, there's some greedy higher ups there that would probably do everything.
Oh, 100%. Everything is led by the stock market now, right? Oh, our stock value has fallen. God forbid you take any money out of a rich billionaire's pocket, right? So back to James. So James is obviously still serving time for attempted extortion. He reaches out to the authorities, specifically US Attorney Jeremy Margolis, volunteering to help solve the very crime that the cops still think that he committed. So I do wonder whether or not this is going to be potentially a way of trying to trap him, because they still definitely believe that he did it. Basically, he hands over hundreds of pages of handwritten manuscripts, diagrams, and elaborate theories, all hypothetical, of course. He also includes detailed sketches showing how the killer might have put the cyanide in the capsules. Basically, the diagrams show how the killer, using a wooden chopping board, would drill holes into it wide enough to stand the Tylenol capsules. He then suggested that you place the empty half of the capsule inside the board and then scoop the cyanide into the open capsules. Then, of course, you scrape off the excess, you reseal the capsules, and then you return them to the bottles. He then even noted how the whole process could be done in the front seat of his car in a parking lot.
Right, wow. He's gone into a lot of detail. Someone that's not involved, he's just basically tried to stitch someone up and get money. But
now all of a sudden he knows how it's done. Of course, he makes it very sure that this can't be seen as a confession, because he made sure to label each of the illustrations with "drawn on speculation" at the request of Assistant U.S. Attorney General Jeremy D. Margolis.
I know he knew a lot about cyanide, or like what was going on in the news. So are we saying he is letting on more than he knows?
So it's either clever and calculated if he was responsible. If he wasn't, then this is just a shameless way of getting attention for himself, right? Absolutely shameless. But eventually in 1995, James is released on parole after 13 years in prison. But then in 2004, again, just showing you what a scumbag he is, he's charged with rape and kidnapping, accused of attacking a woman in his apartment building. But again, another escape from the law, because the charges are dropped when the woman refuses to testify. So he's just a free man. Still, the Tylenol task force, they never let go of the belief that James was the guy. They just don't have enough evidence. But there is one more suspect on the list, and that is a guy called Ted Kaczynski. Do you know that name?
No. How did he get involved? Who the hell is Ted Kaczynski? We haven't met him before, right?
He's the Unabomber.
Unabomber?
Do you not know that story?
Remind me.
So basically, he's this reclusive genius turned terrorist who spent 20 years mailing bombs to various academics and airline executives raging against the industrial society that we were living in, basically.
Right, okay, yeah.
So the reason why he was under suspicion is because one of his first bombings happened actually in Chicago. And at the time, he was reportedly staying with his parents in Lombard, so not too far from actually where the crimes actually happened.
Okay.
But the thing is, though, this didn't fit his MO at all. Ted was typically surgical about who he targeted. His victims always represented something. So they were like a CEO of an airline or a dean of a university or something like that. Someone that if they were killed, it would make huge headlines. It would be significant.
He's
Not
not-
saying that the death of a 12-year-old Mary Kellerman isn't significant, but like someone big.
Yeah, I completely understand. He's not targeting random victims. They're very targeted.
Exactly. Whereas the Tylenol poisonings, they didn't carry any kind of manifesto or any meaningful message. It was just senseless killings.
Not revenge or anything, yeah.
Yeah. And Adam, even to this day, the Tylenol murders, they still remain unsolved. There's no justice, there's no closure, just 7 ordinary families torn apart by something that they'll never understand.
How did they get closure? That's what I want to know. Yes, they've got compensation. Yeah, I'm sure they've been able to make the best of their lives to whatever level they can. But to not know what actually happened and not to get answers from Johnson & Johnson or the police to ever solve these crimes.
Probably the hardest bit, isn't it?
Yeah.
Well, actually, that brings me nicely on to the final words from some of the family members, because Mary Rayner's husband says that their 2-year-old would often point at photographs of his mother and ask when she was coming home. And he was like, for ages, he just had to keep explaining that she was now in heaven. Teresa, Janus's mother, she says that once their house was filled with music, parties, laughter, and now it's just empty. That one gets me the most because it's that silence, right? It's where there was once laughter, there's now not.
Yeah.
That's hard, especially when you're then still stuck in that room, having to kind of listen to that silence. That must be difficult.
And again, yeah, there's these just unsolved questions just plaguing your mind, probably.
And Mary McFarlane's brother, he says that he can't even look at a bottle of Tylenol anymore.
Oh.
And Adam, yeah, it's unsolved, but that is the story of the 1982 Chicago Tylenol murders.
I had no idea about that. I didn't realize what that led in terms of the future of, tamper-proof. But to have like a reputable company and product that you're supposed to trust, you just think like, how else could this happen? What other things have gone wrong that perhaps we don't even know about?
Yeah. And I mean, I could understand that sense if we believe that it was Johnson & Johnson at fault here. I don't necessarily think that they were. I know that there's a big question over that blister pack, but you can't really hold them too much to account. But there are now tamper-proof packaging on a lot of cosmetics and medicine products and stuff. So that's at least comforting to know.
Yeah.
But God, back then, that they didn't have any of that. It's just really difficult to imagine a world where that wasn't just the norm.
I wonder if you work at Johnson & Johnson, there's like always these rumors that go around, or was it Sam from, I don't know.
Yeah. I imagine there would be. There's got to be some of that speculation.
Yeah, because it doesn't sound like Johnson & Johnson themselves have done this purposefully, but, negligence and maybe controls, and then how they might have covered up. We don't know that, obviously.
Yeah.
Then, we just don't know. But yeah, poor families.
I definitely think that it was just someone going store to store, shoplifting the items, filling them with cyanide, and then, just random and senseless.
It seems that way. And I think how they were just able to get away with it. And they're just, obviously, they perhaps didn't do it again because maybe there's a risk of doing that, but they're just hiding in plain sight.
Yeah, that's it. So a couple of years ago, there was the 40th anniversary of the Tylenol murders. As part of that, they released a whole bunch of different articles, which is just really incredibly detailed. That goes into testimony from Helen Jensen, Chuck, the fire lieutenant, Dr. Kim, all the different sequence events that we pretty much covered today, but in a lot more detail. And it's just harrowing. You get to really dive deep into some of the nitty-gritty details of what these people went through and the fight that they went through to try and kind of get ahead of this, because that's the incredible bit. There could have been so many more casualties if it wasn't for those incredible people piecing all those things together
that quickly and getting it out of stores.
But on the flip side, so many of these kind of like, but what if only this small thing had been different, this wouldn't have happened. Like with the Janus family, Stanley and Teresa, if they had just gone home that day, it wouldn't have happened. If Mary McFarlane had taken a tablet from her own stash, she would have then seen the news the next morning and thrown out of the bottle. And the same with Paula.
True, but would someone else have died? Because the fact that there were multiple incidents in a very short space of time is what kind of connected these dots together. So if it wasn't them, it might have been someone else.
Yeah, who knows? So if you guys do want to know more, on the 26th of May, I believe that there is a new documentary coming out on the Tylenol murders, which I'm really excited about. It's going to include some interviews from the actual people that actually lived through this, which is going to be really interesting to watch.
A new insight into, their experience and what happened.
That's right. Yeah. So keep an eye out for that. I think that comes out maybe a couple of days before this. So by the time you listen to this, you can definitely get stuck into the Netflix documentary on Netflix.
Cool.
So yeah, we'll be watching. I hope you will be too. So shall we run the outro?
Yeah, sure.
And so that brings us to the end of another fascinating foray into the Compendium, an assembly of fascinating things. We hope you enjoyed the ride as much as we did.
If today's episode sparked your curiosity, do us a favor and follow us on your favorite podcast app. It truly makes a world of difference and helps more people discover the show.
And for our dedicated freaks out there, don't forget that next week's episode is already waiting for you on our Patreon, and it's completely free to access.
And if you want even more, then join our Certified Freaks tier to unlock the entire archive, delve into exclusive content, and get a sneak peek at what's coming next. We'd love you to be part of our growing community.
As always, don't forget that new episodes drop every Tuesday, and until then, remember, even the most trusted remedies can conceal a deadly secret. See you next time.
See ya.
Curious if who you've been talking to online is who they say they are? The Sea of Love is filled with catfish. Make sure one doesn't hook you with lies. If you're trying to confirm the identity of someone you're talking to on dating apps, you need truthfinder.com. With Truthfinder, you can check public records to see if they're being deceitful about their age, identity, past divorces, and more. Make sure you're not wasting your time and energy on a scammer with truthfinder.com/dating today.
Unplug your cleaning routine with the Ryobi 18-volt 1 Plus cordless cleaning lineup. Our powerful and versatile tools make cleaning a breeze. One battery powers over 300 products, giving you the power to do more. Visit ryobitools.com to learn more, exclusively at the Home Depot.